Right, welcome everyone. Coming down to the end of the year now, we're in October, back to another Sparked AU Core Technical Design Group online meeting. And I'd like to start this meeting with an acknowledgement of country, and we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all gather. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. I'm coming to you today from Brisbane, which is the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara country peoples. Our agenda for today, and this is a ballot reconciliation call. We've got a few more of those where the primary thing that we're working through is the ballot feedback to determine what changes, if any. There are a few that we've decided to change, will happen in AU Core R1 before it's published. And there's also some things that we've said need to go on our backlog, and we're continuing that discussion today. So first off, we'll do what we always do, which is our usual business with our approval of minutes and our actions, going through any updates and news, and there is a bit. And then we'll get into our ballot reconciliation. So there were 2 electronic votes that were out, block vote 3 and 4. And we also have 2 items that have been carried over, where we started talking about them in the last meeting, and they have been scheduled to be discussed in this one. There's a follow-up that's been raised relating to the decision we made to remove mass support from location identifier in AU Core location profile, around whether or not we remove any reference to that, to essentially the search parameter in the requirements for AU Core. And lastly, we have the new item, which is about patient-only search from AU Core observation profiles. I think someone might need to go on mute. They've just got a really loud typing going on. Heath, your hand's raised already. What's happening?
I just ran the agenda. 46883 was removed from one of the block votes. We're not
It'll be
looking
in here.
at that.
Yeah, it's in here. It's under the referred to telecom, which I just did not obviously update this table. It's in the
Okay.
It's coming.
Yeah. So just a reminder, I'm only here for 30 minutes if you wanted to cover that in the first part or not.
Okay, so if you're only available for 30 minutes, then what we will do is, I believe that this continued one on identifier search parameters here, 46782, is your issue, that we didn't quite come to a disposition on the last meeting, so we should prioritize that. And also the one that you asked to be referred to telecom. So we can move those 2 forwards, have that discussion, and then move through the rest of the agenda.
Thank you.
I'll just double check. Are there any other concerns? Does anyone else need to move anything forwards? Or will we just proceed? Yep, sorry.
I do. It's Ruben 47179. I'm also only here for 30 minutes today.
Well, I think some of these are going to have to be kicked maybe to the next meeting, depending on what happens. So then let's check. Heath, Ruben, Heath, are you available for the next meeting on the 31st, I believe?
Should be.
Ruben, will you be available for the 31st?
Should be too.
Okay, so we will progress with what we can, and then if you need to drop off and we haven't gotten through that issue, we will just move that to the next meeting and just let us know that you're having to drop off so that we don't talk about it.
Why don't we just finish off the continued ones that addresses one of mine and one of Ruben's, and the 46883 can move to next time.
Okay, that's these 2.
Cool. Okay,
items carried over. So let's go through the identifier search parameter ones, first one. Then, since you popped your hand up first, Heath. So I don't have any particular detailed slides for this. Heath, do you want to give a summary of where we were at and walk that through? I'll go to the JIRA ticket, but otherwise please direct me.
I need to refresh myself too.
I can also go to the minutes, which summarize from our last meeting on what was discussed. It's this item.
Was it as simple as us just saying, do we need a system name or not with the identifier?
We got to, I think, the position of having to formulate the motion, which might be that simple.
Is there any objection to what the current resolution says?
Don't hear any. I don't know. Do you need a motion to say that yes, all search parameters with identifiers will include the system name where that identifier is applicable?
In this case, it's specifically the practitioner identifier, location identifier, organization identifier, and practitioner role identifier that are in scope of this item. Though I believe there was some debate on if location identifier, since it is no longer must support, should be removed from the proposed resolution.
Is that where we got to?
Yes, that was part of the refinements that we were discussing. There was that one. That was, I think, the primary discussion.
Oh, that's right. There was also some stuff around what if there was no system, and the things like if it was a GUID as well. So I think that's where we started getting a bit fumbly when we started looking at those the parts in the FHIR specification regarding the token search parameter and what to do when, yeah, there was effectively a null system in the data.
Well, whether you know it or not doesn't always mean it's null, but the question.
So
Okay.
there was these 4 scenarios here. We were trying to interpret what these scenarios were supporting in the context of us making system mandatory. So the third
This is about, yeah.
The third one in particular, where there is a delimiter, system delimiter, and then code. And this description here was basically saying has no system properties. And that kind of tied back to the scenario that someone raised around, or what if I don't have a system? And I think that was something to do with also GUIDs and stuff like that as well. So,
Which was noted that concern was addressed, as GUIDs have a fixed system in FHIR.
So effectively we were, I think there might have been something about the 4th one as well, but I think again we agreed that the 4th one was actually looking for any record that had an identifier with that system.
Which would not, I believe, be supported from mandating someone supplying code and system.
Exactly. Whereas the 3rd one was almost the opposite, where it's actually saying that is no system in the data.
Well, not necessarily. This is what the requester forms. The requester says for any system or no system at all, it's just code as mandated. So that one is currently supported to a degree.
It's willing to accept the codes, doesn't matter what system it comes from.
That's right. The resolution was to mandate supplying system and code, which I believe moves it to only this.
I think that's where we got stuck, because I'm reading the end of the 3rd one and it says the and the coding / identifier has no system property.
No system property here.
So I interpret that differently to you. That is, the data has a code element, but it has a value element, but doesn't have a system element.
I believe if we say make both system and code mandatory, we mean system and code, not conditionally. Sometimes if the value itself never has a system, then you don't have to, but when it does, you do have to. So in terms of a point of clarification, I believe this thing of, for a requester, an AU Core requester, when they submit a search on the identifier search parameter, and if we mandate both the provision of system and the provision of code, I believe that looks like this, a system and a code.
Yeah, I agree with that. But where we're getting stuck is that the third one is technically still providing a system, but that system is
no system.
no system. Exactly.
FHIR doesn't recognize emptiness as the submission of a value. Emptiness isn't allowed. You haven't provided it.
Exactly. So it has no system, but the parameter is still being specified as no system. So it's an exact match on no system.
So what you would have to say then is that you are a requester shall either support system and code mandatory or code and whatever this is.
Well, I interpret that as a no system. So system is being provided, but with no system, because you've got your delimiter saying there is no system, and here is the code for that no system. So I'm doing an exact match on an identifier that has no system element with a value of X.
So I think I understand that what is being asked is to support these 2 points for practitioner role identifier, organization identifier, practitioner identifier, and location identifier.
Well, it's not must support anymore, so I'm happy to strike that out.
Okay. So on the basis, are there questions then or further clarifications from people to understand what is being proposed? Millie?
Just on the 4th point, I hadn't thought that through until you mentioned it just before. But I imagine there would be use cases for finding all records that have anything for a given system. I was just trying to think through if this change rules out that 4th option in AE Core, is there a modifier or something that means someone could answer that use case in a different way?
What it means, so it doesn't rule it out internally, but it means crossing system boundaries, noting that, this is an interoperability spec, that an AU Core requester in its use cases can't just say, give me any patient with an IHI. We have to note that with how this is set up, the particular support for identifiers is, let's go to, but we go practitioner role. We can talk about this in the context of practitioner role in particular.
Well, the existing requirement already discounts that option.
It does.
Code is mandatory by a client already. So that 4th option is not even valid now.
Yep. Cool.
So what we're actually, out of that list of 4, we're actually reducing that to a list of 2. It's already a list of 3 of 4. Now we're removing the option of the first one.
Correct. We're saying at least a code? then all these were in play. And Heath is proposing to not just have the first one and to allow these two, basically.
Yep.
Brett.
So are we going to make these shall not for the two other options?
Don't have to, depending on how it's worded. It's already shall not for this because we state you shall provide a code value, at least. So that's already specified in AU Core. We could show, I guess there's two things. There's one is, do we agree to limit to this? And the other is, what is the wording? And so let's deal with the first part first. Although, David, you've got a comment?
Yeah, just to be clear. So what we're saying is if I'm requesting a search for a person or a location, regardless, and I have an identifier, that I don't have to tell you where I got that identifier from. You'll know what to do with it.
At the moment, yes, it looks like this. That is allowed in AU Core. I can just say identifier and then provide a number.
You're trying to match against all the identifiers. Yeah, support.
That's it's not good.
Yeah, hence the
Not normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So now we must have a source
Yes.
system. So that third one is what you're putting the kibosh on. Okay, good.
Yes. Landon?
I guess my question is, do people not have a code system associated with their identifiers? I was just wondering if people can talk to, if they have that in their systems.
Sorry, is he asking, are people collecting identifiers without actually telling you what type of identifier it is? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on out there. Absolutely. If anything, we're
Okay.
looking for more descriptive identifiers to be sure we know what exactly we're looking at.
I can talk from our experience at Orion, and whenever we get an identifier, if the system is not provided, we will assign one by default. So we really do not deal with identifiers that don't have the system associated with it.
Right. Any other? Sorry, please go ahead, Daniel.
It's Daniel here. In my experience, I have occasionally come across the use of the UIDs or GUIDs or OIDs being used. But as you indicated earlier, Danielle, it is possible to put in a system identifier for that. Whether that was actually stored though, when the relevant record was stored into the server is the key issue.
Yep. Brett?
I'm feeling we shouldn't put this on the requester at all. We should just make it a responder shell and.
Which it is. So that's the current case. The current case is responder shall support both. It is, at the moment, it's mandatory for the request to provide at least a thing, going, hey, I'm at least looking for this thing. I might tell you I'm looking for this thing, and it happens to be a prescriber number.
Why do we have to put anything on the requester? Because the responder will just reject it.
They won't, well, unless that's their business rule.
Yeah, but they don't have to do anything with it. Like, it's not. Why are we putting rules on the requester at all?
Is it because we're saying search, we're searching here, here's the system I recognize this person in? You know, isn't it the context of the search we're trying to push through?
So for
Yeah.
the particular case I'm trying to deal with is in the context of a facade where a system may have multiple identifiers. They might have a Medicare number, an IHI, a ABN, HPIO, blah, blah, blah. And so we're looking for making sure that we're going to the right place in the database to actually do our comparison against, rather than having to go and look in multiple places and seeing if we could find this identifier.
So I don't know why we need to, like, the request, if your request is making a request that can't be serviced, you can behave however you want in response to that. You may service it, you may not.
Yes, at the moment, it's a should that the requester clarifies, but not a shall. And I guess the issue under discussion is in R1 to strengthen that to a shall.
Yeah, I don't know why we need to do that on requesters, because it's up to the responder how they behave.
Michael?
Yeah, I agree with Brett. These requester conformance statements are a bit hard to grapple with, given that the conformance is on the server and the server gets something that it doesn't expect, it just rejects it. So it's more guidance. This is more guidance to saying that when you're doing searches as a requester, you should be doing it in this way. But the actual conformance is on the server on what types of searches it supports. But this is a broader issue than this. It's across a whole heap of things on requesters.
Well, I would then argue that the current responder obligation is ambiguous because it's saying it shall support both.
Yeah, so maybe we should firm that up, like to make sure that it only supports that. Because then you're going to implement it
but
on
then
the
it can't
server.
support what you're saying that the requester is allowed to do. So that's the problem at the moment, is the requester is allowed to provide just the value, but the server shall support both. Does that mean that they shall support both code and system, or that they should be able to support code only and code and system?
That needs clarity on the server, what the server supports, shall
I'll
support.
just hang on. Before we do that, this is how we do all of those things. This is not restricted to this. Where there's more than one kind of parameter to talk about here, we go, this is the mandatory one, but you might want to consider more than the mandatory. And we state that the server has to support those mandatory things, both of them mandatorily. That's consistent, not just in AU Core, about across US Core, across international specifications, that this is the language for it. I would caution us against deciding that we now suddenly don't understand it.
So what are you saying both means? That we're supporting both?
A responder shall support a code and shall support the system values. We have...
Which is different to code only.
They're about the parts of here, a system. So we say requesters shall support this, and we decided that meant that it can do these three things.
Well, it also, it could be interpreted that you support all four in its current form.
Well, this bit shall provide at least code. We just talked about and said that that means these.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a requester requirement.
It is.
Yeah, I think it's easier stated as server requirements, and so that you're saying the server shall support system and code, which is the two options, and the rest are may, and that's it.
The way that you've just stated that, Brett, is clear. The way it's currently stated is it's not.
I agree.
Shall support both. All Brett said is the rest are may, which is always understood.
Yeah.
Everything not marked is may.
That's the
I
responder.
could say
It's
and
the
responder.
may
Responder.
after every single sentence,
Oh, no.
including on the requester.
The responder shall support both. Is the problem.
And the rest is may.
Yes.
I could say both is code and system.
Yeah, code. Yeah, I think you say code and system.
Yeah, I think it needs to be
Make it
explicit.
clear. Yeah. And I don't think we need to say anything about requester. Like I don't, because the requester can do what it likes and the server is going to respond, right? So it's
well, you don't want, I guess you don't want to have unnecessary interactions, and I think isn't this part of the deal, is to say that if I'm going to ask you to search for something, is the service you're offering to say I can search across multiple systems? Is that what the backend service is ultimately going to do, or are we trying to direct it into which system we want it to search in?
But the client's not going to just randomly do things. The client's going to look at your AU Core requirements and implement against those. against.
Okay, I think we're going, I'm going to
Yeah.
say, I think we're going down an English rabbit hole. The word round has 23 meanings. The more we look at stuff and try to go, what does it really, really mean? We're actually never, ever going to land on a single place. What we need to do is get to a position where it's readable enough and we can work through that and then continue to refine. So the substance under topic wasn't about improving necessarily the wording. The substance under topic was actually changing that it's optional to do system. And the substance under topic was in fact that no, requesters need to provide both in a single request. And then we were having discussions about that's actually not something that we want requesters to have to do. Or is it? Is the discussion. Michael, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just think the server language does need to change given the context of the requester now, because the way it's written here, so that by us removing the requester shall provide at least code, right? Implied then that the responder will accept that, right? Or will accept system and
we'll
code.
support this, yes. Like
yeah, right.
the requester can do this, and it can
and
do
should
that.
do that,
and
but the responder shall support both. So it supports both of those two, the shall and the should from the requester.
Yeah.
Right. So that shall support both now needs to change because there is no both.
So as a follow-up, or do you want to motion that? And we can make that. It's not the subject of this JIRA, guys. We've gone down a rabbit hole, and that's okay. But if someone would like to motion a wording improvement that will then be applied across every single search parameter that does similar language, we can.
Oh, it's only because we're changing now. We're changing. There is no both because we're saying the requester has to provide system and code.
Okay, then I'm going to.
So there is no both anymore.
Hang on. Let's come back because that wasn't actually persuasive yet.
Okay.
So let's come back to the normative change. Is there a normative change? Heath, is yours about, is there a normative change?
I would like to, I think you're right. Let's go with the original ballot issue, which was about the requester requirements. And if you're happy to take the principle of what we're doing, not so much the wording, then I would like to put forward a motion that the requester shall provide both the system and code values. You can worry about the wording, but that's the intent of what my proposal is. My motion.
I'll second. I'm happy to second that one.
Okay, so we have a motion that's been motioned from Heath, seconded from David. The motion is that requester shall provide both system and code values in a request for practitioner identifier, location identifier, organization identifier, and practitioner role identifier. That is the motion. Sorry?
Remove location from that list.
Okay, friendly amendment. So it is practitioner identifier, organization identifier, and practitioner role identifier.
Wait, just why did you want to take location out of there? Just since I'm seconder.
Because identifiers no longer must support the location.
Can you search for Perth? We don't need an identifier for Perth.
Do you want to in terms of minimum requirements? I mean, you can, but there's a difference between can you, in which case AU Core does not prohibit any legal FHIR search, but it is not a minimum requirement.
I guess at the moment the search parameter still exists. It's only been, the element's been removed. I don't know that the search parameter's been removed.
The search strength was may. So whether it is present in the AU Core spec or not, it was always may. If we put in this rule, we would actually say then, you still don't have to do it. And in fact, we don't recommend that you do it because it's not should. But if you chose to do so, you shall provide system and code would be what we were saying if this passes still having location identifier mentioned.
Okay, leave location in.
All right. Should I summarize the motion again for people or is that clear?
I think the change to B is pretty much what I'm motioning.
Okay. So I'm going to put up a poll. I'm going to launch that now. That's the vote for the current motion. You should be seeing that on your screen. All right. We've got lots of people coming in now on those votes. I'll just give it another 15 seconds for people to come through with an answer, be that affirmative, negative, or abstain, either because you don't care or don't think that you can make a determination at this time. And we're going to count that down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll. And share that. There are 21 who have voted affirmative, which means we will be tightening the rules on AU Core Requester on those identifiers. There are 5 negative and there are 9 abstains, so the motion passes.
Did you add Landon as an affirmative?
I did not. Are you in the chat, Landon?
Yeah, sorry, I popped in the chat. So 22 affirmative.
I did not get a notification on the chat. All right. There we go. So that is 22 affirmative, as you said, 5 negative and 9 abstain. Okay. So we will make that change. So noting that we are just making that change now, coming back to the wording, we will remove the shall at least a code value, and typically the wording would change now anyway on responder, where the requester should provide both the system and code values. And instead that would say, we would drop this and this would say the requester shall provide both the system and code values, is what we would say. We can improve that as we go when we see what that looks like.
Ultimately, it just makes it really flexible. I guess that's what we're saying. Yeah.
I will now entertain the discussion, the follow-up one, on instead of the requester saying shall support both, what would typically happen is it would say the responder shall support both the system and code values. Well, hang on, shall support the system and code values, I believe. Let's actually go check that because it exists on patient. Shouldn't rely on my spotty memory. Bye, Heath. Down here, we already have this in patient. What does it say? Ah, that's what that says there. The only instance so far we've got both system and code values, and it says the responder shall support both. I will now entertain a improvement suggestion on if people read this and they don't know what this means, what should be said. Michael.
I think that's maybe okay in that context, as long as it's living together. That the both is just not explicit saying they must be together. Because I could support code by itself, I could support system by itself. Don't know whether we want to firm that up to say shall support rather than both. I don't know how we say it, but to say that system and code must be provided together.
Well, how about we then leave this offline, and if you or someone else comes up with an improved suggestion, they can submit that through the Jira feedback, and we can bring it back to this group to go, well, here's a suggestion. Do we like it, basically?
Yeah, I think that's fair, given it's okay. But it potentially could be better, but it might be okay for now.
All right. Okay, so we have made that determination. Now we've gone past the time, and let me just check participants. I believe Heath has dropped off. I think Ruben might have had to go as well. Okay, so that means that there are a couple of items now that we do need to hold over to the next meeting. So let's actually go right back to the beginning in our agenda. Oops, that's this page. Okay, so now we'll get to our usual business at this point. And then we'll go through parts of ballot reconciliation. While we don't, we will again push AU variance statement off onto the next meeting. And That means we will talk about in this meeting, location identifier search, the follow-up for that, and the removing patient only. So those are still here. We've just decided about identifier search. All right, let's keep going then. So we're getting around to approval of minutes. We usually do this in the first couple of minutes, but we're coming back to it now. So I'm just going to go to these. These were sent round, I think, at the end of last week for review. And so this is the set of minutes that were sent out for people to provide any feedback or to edit. I'll just do a quick scroll down so that you can see. We've got our attendees, we've got our recording linked and the slides, and also which motions were passed and what we discussed, and an action that we'll talk about shortly. Now, does anyone need any more time to review these? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So would someone like to motion to approve those minutes?
I'm happy to motion to approve, Danielle. It's Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. Who would like to second that?
I'll second, Doshi.
Okay, thanks, Dushi. So I'm about to pop up the poll for approval of the minutes. Oops, I don't think I stopped sharing the last one. Stop sharing, my bad. Okay, so we've got the poll up for approval of minutes. If this is your first meeting, please click abstain. If you were at the last meeting, it'd be great if you could either affirm those minutes or negative if you think there's still something that needs to be changed about them. All right, I'm just going to count that down now from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and end that poll, share the results. So we have 13 have voted affirmative, there are 0 negative, and we have 18 who have abstained. So that motion is passed and the minutes are approved. Okay, so let's go back to our other usual business. So there's one action out of our last meeting, which was on the discussion around the FHIR IG Variance process. And that has been actioned because it's actually tied to some things and some outcomes. We've got slides later on to go through that. And fair warning, for the board members on the line, Andy or Brett, I might actually throw to you to give a quick summary of the outcomes of the board discussion. But so that has been actioned and those results are back for us to have an update on. Other updates and news. So the CDG meeting was held, gosh, a couple of days ago on AUCDI-R2, and we will get outcomes from that meeting and the other workshops scheduled in for our 28th of November call around AUCDI-R2. And what that means for us is we kind of finished wrapping up the ballot reconciliation of R1 and go through and start doing planning and scoping for R2. Which, coming to the subject of scoping for R2, there's a workshop. I've got a slide there with links and everything, but you folks should have gotten an email, I think maybe yesterday, saying, hey, there's a scoping workshop that we would like you to attend. Last update, patient summary FHIR IG project. So when last we spoke, that had FHIR workgroup approval and was with the board for endorsement. The board has endorsed that project. So that has now started. You should have an email, I think, that came out from Sparked calling for participants, and also there's a link there to the project page. I'm not going to spend too much more time on that now. I think further discussion on that in this technical design group is really going to be part of what we do after we wrap up R1 around how we're going to operate going forwards. and also both patient summary and e-requesting feeding into AU Core R2. So, this is just the slide, so you can now see there's a patient summary FHIR IG underneath the AU Core TDG now sitting there. Connectathon. So reminder, Connectathon is happening. If you've missed out on a ticket, please email events@hl7.com.au to go on the wait list. They're going through those this week. So please get onto that. And just a reminder, we're going to be going through the basic test scenarios for AU Core R1, where we'll test things like the decision we just made today, basically, and confirm that that is indeed what we're going to carry forwards from R1, and also start doing some basic patient summary test scenarios on AU Core data. Are there any questions about the Connectathon at this stage? Okay, cool. This is the scoping workshop. So moving on from R1, and I have something floating around that is our meetings. Okay, so that's largely around ballot reconciliation. But sort of what we forecast earlier is that ballot reconciliation really goes through in October, and then basically November is our transition month, where we're wrapping up R1, including looking at results of testing and things like FMM2. And then November is when we're really kicking off and starting to go through our backlog and priorities for AU Core R2. So what we've done is scheduled to have a half-day workshop on the 12th of December. So if you are interested to attend in Melbourne for a half day, so a morning on the 12th of December, then please email the Spark team at spark@csiro.au to express your interest for that. And that will feed in some of what I expect we're going to be talking about in November as we have those discussions about what's in AUCDIR2, what's in e-requesting, what's coming in terms of patient summary, and what we want to take from our backlog, including re-examining the things that we have, I guess, decided were considered for future use out of this and the previous ballot. All right, so update on where we are. Right, so triage is done. We're making our way pretty handily through reconciliation. And we're at about 65% of that now. And we're also starting to make our way in putting those changes into the IG. So thanks to Dushi and Jamie, I think, who are doing the lion's share of those changes after we vote on them. So there's about 30% overall have already gone into the IG. We're really targeting bringing the normative changes all done into the AU Core IG for the December Connectathon, so we can make sure we're doing that testing to confirm that this is the baseline and it's working the way we want it to. A little breakdown now that we've done triage and we've moved through things. So out of the 108 JIRA issues that got submitted for AU Core Ballot, here's where we are. So we've had some, I think, really significant improvements from the community in terms of understanding how to bring issues through and what kind of do they need to have in them and how does it all work. We're going from, I guess, smallest to largest. There's just one invalid issue this time. I think there were 3 in our ballot for comment. 4 have been retracted for various reasons. So someone submitted a ballot item and has later made a decision to withdraw that from ballot. Only 4 items are duplicates. So they're the same issue as some other ballot issue. 9 are out of scope. Some are the fire standards. Some are about tooling. 20 of those have been technical corrections. if you remember when we went through what are the different kinds of issues. So that's where they are essentially, I guess, really defects or really obvious changes that are assessed through the co-chair triage on whether or not they in fact are a technical correction and therefore have to be made, or if they are in fact not in scope of AU Core. And then we have change requests. So that's a really pretty high margin for us to consider, which is pretty fantastic that what's come through are 70 change requests, some of which have been raised to get those on the backlog for R2, and some of them are talking about changes that we need to make, whether it's editorial and typographical or navigation structure, or for some of them, like what we've talked about today, are the normative, where we're trying to address the conformance requirements across requesters and responders and profiles. So I think we've basically already covered this. So this is today's meeting. We won't get through all 15 because some we now have to move to our next one. And then we've got the 31st of October, which was where we were originally scheduling finishing ballot reconciliation. But looking at the number of issues we have, there's in fact going to do that in our 14th of November meeting. So we'll try to get through the substance and the ones we need to discuss in this meeting and the 31st. And then as part of like the AU Core wrap up on the 14th of November, we'll also go through the last set of block votes for AU Core votes 7 and 8. Now I'm going to do a quick report back on the block votes for this meeting. So there were votes 3 and 4. So there was this one from 3, which are items that are related to AU Core profiles for vitals and measures. That has completed. I'll just go there now. Click. Okay. So out of this, this was a mixture of things that weren't persuasive, some things that need to go on the backlog for consideration, whether that's R2 or later. And I think there was quite a few of those that are things that we will need to get back to, especially in the diagnostic space, around when we start to look at bringing in diagnostic report, perhaps, and also taking in some of the evidence from downstream use cases, where we might want to start looking at, do we actually restrict value sets in future? So that was that vote. This one on 4 is about the informative stuff. So that is guidance page, it's profiles and extensions page, search parameters, and so there's only a few items in this block vote. This one's, did I link the wrong thing? No. This is the right one. Let me just check. Yes, that's the right one. Okay, cool. So there are only a few items in this block vote, one of which has been moved to telecom, which was meant to be today, but that is now going to be postponed to our next meeting so that Heath can speak to that. And so this will change our guidance page. Yeah, basically, it's going to change the guidance page. So some of that material over on, yeah, things like this read search syntax will have some improvements in it. Okay. There's, oops, go back up. There's also this one, which was in this block vote. I don't know why the filter isn't showing that now. I must have changed something. Ah, because it's applied now. Okay. So this was actioning a change to the condition example to remove severity from that example. That's also in there. There was a comment provided to, there was a really interesting comment provided that was going through and talking about how what we could do is include stage. So there's a element in AU core condition that isn't must support in AU core profile at this time, in that could include the more detailed information. That's not going to be actioned in the AU core IG at this stage, because the examples in AU core are about demonstrating what, I guess, the must support rules are and what is the shape of the data that we have put some obligations on in AU core, not necessarily a full, complete kind of picture. All right, I'm going to move on from reporting on the block votes, unless anyone has any questions or something they wanted me to walk through. All right, so let's go through this item. And I'm just going to say we've already done 46782, and we can't discuss 47179. So we will not be making a decision on 47179 at this stage. But there are the updates to the actions from this that we need to report on. So we're just going to move into doing that now, and then continue to leave the decision making off to the next meeting. So there's some context for this. I see that most of the people on the line were with us in the previous discussion, and this is around the AU variance statement. There was an action for, let me just, quick summary. So there was a ballot issue that was raised, and it was referencing that there were some preferred actions to be taken by essentially the board and by the FHIR work group to change the variance statement requirements. For those of you who aren't aware, just quickly going to the page in AU Core, there is, as there is also in e-requesting, a variance section, which talks about whether or not this IG has any variance from AU Core and AU Base, because we want to be consistent and harmonised in the Australian realm. And the rules for what are in here are in this process document. And in the context of talking about this JIRA item, and there was lots of discussion about who can change it, where can things change. There was an action taken from Ruben, Andy and Brett, who were board members, to take that to the board to discuss the requests and to also bring it to the FHIR work group to look at what changes need to be made. So in terms of updates from actions from this, I know that some members have dropped off, but Brett, you're on the call. Can you provide a quick summary of the outcomes from the board in relation to this?
Yeah, so it was primarily addressing some of the issues there. So the key outcomes there on the slide. So basically some corrections to the words to clarify what Australian realm meant as part of the just to clarify exactly which IGs we were talking about, and also then to publish a version of this as a document, as a governance document, so it won't exist only in the Confluence page. It will actually be a published governance document with a version on it, and the change probably needed to be addressed would be that version document is to be referenced explicitly. So basically which version of the variance requirements you are referring to in the variance statement in the IGs. So that's pretty much where we landed. So that was, the FHIR work group was across this and kind of worked to get this put in front of the board, and the board has seen it and approved that as well as the way to go.
Thanks, Brett. So what that means for us is that there was a decision taken from the board and the FHIR work group to make changes to the requirements. They will update the governance document to publish that. And when it is published, there'll be a directive that comes to us. That's usually from co-chairs. So the AU FHIR work group co-chairs will email the projects to say that there's some updated requirements and the FHIR IG needs to change to meet those. from our perspective, we will do that. So that's AU Core, and there's also e-requesting and patient summary. It's important to note, I guess, folks, that this is informative. So there's no normative changes here. It's mostly, I think, editorial improvements to what this section says, basically. So some of the wording in this bit up here changes and nothing else changes for us. And so as soon as that as soon as the FHIR work group has finished updating that document and sends it out, we will make that change. Okay. Are there any questions about this particular, I guess, action and the outcomes for it? I guess I expect it to be in R1. I would suggest that that's probably going to happen by the end of November, is an update there. Would you think that's about right, Brett? Yeah,
absolutely. I think, in fact, you'll probably have this directive come out, I think, in the next week or two, probably it will be ready. Because, yeah, really there's only minor changes and really it's just preparing the publication, which is relatively straightforward after that.
All right, so that's going to happen. That is, to an extent, something that is going to happen regardless of what we do with this ballot issue, because I just wanted to take this opportunity to stress, especially for the new people, that from our perspective as an AU Core technical design group, we sit under the governance of the FHIR work group. So we're a technical subcommittee from the FHIR work group, and who is an authorised work group under the board. And so our mission, charter and processes are all approved from that. And I do want to stress that complying with the governance and policy in a timely manner is mandatory. So when we get that directive, we will action that, and that needs to be prioritised. That's usually within a week. And we can have directives that come to us that are process-wise. So if we need to change some of what we're doing, or it could be tooling, and it could be a product directive like the one that's just coming out now, which says, look, part of the IG, that page in particular, there are some changed requirements and you need to action that. And those typically come to us from two places, either the FHIR work group or the board itself. I'm also raising this because the board is working through some items that we expect to come to us soon. They are around terminology, licensing and IP updates, where some items were raised in ballot and they are in fact up to the board to make that decision. So that's being passed to the board. And when the board determines what changes, if any, that will come back to us in a directive to change that content if there are changes. So there is, to a certain extent, we have to keep in mind when we're going through ballot resolution that complying with our governance requirements and policy requirements within HL7 Australia, it's not optional, it's mandatory. It's not really up for debate as part of ballot. That's within the, it's not in the remit of ballot to be changing what is in terms of the governance and operation. Now, what we can do and what we will do next week then in terms of that item is we're going to be discussing the governance and policy, some of which we just got the updates from, and we can provide further feedback. Oh, I also forgot there's one here. So there's a recent change that's come out of the FHIR work group in that last meeting as well. And that has said that so next year, and so it's probably unlikely to change AU Core R1, but next year there's going to be a project initiated by the FHIR work group to look at the policy and conventions for HL7AU FHIR artifacts. That includes profiles and extensions and IGs. It includes things like terminology artifacts and what needs to happen, be that around versioning or metadata conventions or so forth. And similarly to the variance statement, whatever decisions are made and ratified by both the FHIR work group and the board, they will be things that will be passed to us to action. Okay. So before I guess I move on from that topic of we do sit within the wider context, and some of these decisions are made by other groups, and that's where that discussion needs to happen. Are there any questions on, I guess, this topic, like the update, the fact that we might get some changes next year? Right. Let's move on then. So we'll skip past this slide because that is to say, well, what do we do with this ballot issue now? Since it's being actioned through the usual operational content, we'll discuss and come to a disposition on the 31st of October. So let's move on to this one, which actually we have to move on from because Heath isn't available at this point, and this is what Heath referred to Telecom. So that has to be the next meeting. And let's come on to this one. So this is a follow-on one. And Landon, I will pass to you to talk through this. Did you want to share your screen, or do you want to just direct me on where to go?
No, you can continue sharing yours. There's not a lot to this one. I'll quickly set the context. On the 3rd of the 10th, we passed a motion to remove must support requirement for location identifier. And we actually discussed this item just before with Heath. So what the disposition was is that it wasn't commonly used across most contexts. And we were to remove the location identifier consistent with the approach in US Core and AU provider directory. This motion passed. So given this change, we propose a follow-up decision to also remove the reference to location identifier search parameter. Currently, the location identifier search parameter is marked as may, meaning its use is optional. However, upon review, we find that the parameter lacks clear defined relevance in practical workflows. So without a specific use case or recognized necessity, it's a good candidate for removal to ensure that we don't maintain search parameters or elements that don't have a clear function. So what I'd like to do is maybe throw out for comments and questions. Does anyone think that we should keep the location identifier search parameter considering we removed it from must support? So I might, throw that out for questions if anyone has any feedback on that.
Thanks, Landon. So I guess that's a question to the group. Federica.
Yeah, I agree with removing the search parameter. It's quite rare to have that need. What we have seen using mostly is really the name and the address. So yeah, I agree with this change.
Thanks, Federica. Any other comments or questions on this, I guess, proposal? I'm not hearing any. Before I entertain a motion, is there anything that people would like to see kind of walked through further? Does anyone want to see the page in AU Core or discuss any of that before we open for a motion? Rosemary?
Yes, I'm just surprised with this location identifier. I'm assuming that this would be eventually a numeric, and in the future we probably would be best searching via numeric rather than name and address. So I'm surprised by the fact that we want to actually remove it.
And so I guess associated with that is that the current supported types, and I'll qualify supported, the current defined types in Australia for location identifier are things like NATA site number and LSPNs. And in terms of what AU Core is setting, the summary of the discussion was that there wasn't a belief that in all use cases, no matter what, do we want you to supply all identifiers that you know, which is why it went from the AU Core profile in R1. There wasn't any strong evidence to suggest that it was something that was looked at in multiple use cases. And what that means then is if we currently say, well, identifier is an element and you might want to search by it. At the moment in AU Core, it was highlighted as may because it was must support in the profile to indicate that this is something that implementers need to consider whether or not they want to use. And so since we're no longer putting must support on it, it's come back to say, well, yes, can we confirm this is still something we want to highlight to people? Or is it in fact something that in R1 we aren't going to? Sorry, Brett, I see your hands raised.
Oh, no, I was just going to weigh in on that too. Yeah, because I think we kind of at the point of not really having anything to say about location identifier in AU Core. So once we're at that point, I think we kind of then that flows on into the search parameter anyway. We don't really need to say anything about that either, because I think once if we were to pick up identifiers of use or well-known shareable kind of identifiers that people would use in an interoperable way, I think that would be a good case to add it back in. But I think, there's no, at the moment, we haven't got anything sort of general purpose wise that we're expecting people to do around location identifier. So it's just, not in scope at the moment.
Are there any further comments on why we might or might not find this particular search parameter of value? David?
Yeah, I guess I'm pondering that one because, again, the idea that from a search perspective, if I'm searching my own system, I don't know, like, again, do I have a GUID representing this location? So yeah, if I do, then I guess May says, yeah, go ahead and stick that in there, so you're okay. Otherwise, I might be searching for by a postcode. So it seems to handle everything.
I
mean,
think
yes,
it's also
right, anyway, we'll just
it's not
qualify
saying
that if we remove this, the same requirements still apply. May, AU Core is essentially, this is just pure documentation. You may do it anyway.
And within your particular usage, you can implement it if you want to. If you think that's something you want to support in your system, you can, of course can do that. It's just it just means you can't have this expectation of others. So it's I think that's it kind of just is saying we don't have a real identified use yet.
So largely I think the subject under discussion will be, do we keep it in the table or not, noting that it's still fully optional in either case. There's no obligation on a requester to search by identifier or a responder to support the identifier search because it's May. So with that being said, would someone like to make a motion? I guess I'll come back to this slide.
I can put forward a motion to remove the location identifier search parameter.
Okay, would someone like to second that? Okay, sorry, Millie?
Yep.
Okay, so are there any other comments or questions while I find the electronic poll for us? No, all right, let's just vote for the current motion back. Relaunch poll, okay. So you should see that poll come up now. And the motion is to remove from AU Core the location identifier, noting it was currently May. We've got people coming through now. So if you can't see this poll and you're online, you can either verbally say whether you're affirmative, negative, or abstain, or you can put in the chat, now that I'm paying attention to it, whether you are affirmative, negative, or abstain. There just seems to be a couple of people that this poll just isn't coming up for. Okay, so let's count that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll, share the results. So with what I'm seeing in the chat, where I'm seeing 20 in affirmative, 2 negative, and 7 abstain. So that motion has carried. So we will be removing from AU Core reference to location identifier, which does overlay on top of the previous decision we made around if it was in AU Core, this is what it would say. And we're going to remove that. All right. Just check. Are people still seeing me share the results, or did I stop that from sharing? What have I done?
Yeah, we saw it all.
All right, thank you. Okay, back to this then. So from location identifier, we have the next one about revisiting. Now we don't have long, so let's try to get through this though. Revisiting, I'm going to do really quick update. Revisiting decisions. There's a special process for this. What that means is if we're coming back to reopen something, considering a decision that's already made, we do need to consider why. So there should be some changed circumstances, some further things to discuss in light of what we already made, maybe more evidence, where we go through and consider whether we want to revisit an item before we then go through and decide what to do with it after we choose to reopen it, if we do. So what we're about to come to is an item that was raised in ballot, which is something that we previously considered and made a decision, and it's asking us to revisit it. And when we do and go through the voting, it needs to be a 2/3 majority, not a simple majority, to reopen the decision. And that's what we're about to go through and test. So this one, which I have, here it is. So this is the suggested item for revisiting, which is about the support in AU Core for patient-only search for observations. At this point, I think it might be faster to hand over to you, Andrew, who has raised this for us, to walk us through a summary of what, why, and why you want to propose that we should be revisiting this.
Definitely. Thank you, Danielle. So I raised this in the most recent ballot as something to revisit because it was previously raised in the draft ballot for comments, just asking for it to be removed. And as Danielle has put there, there was a response to that. Under my ballot submission for this version, kind of expanded on that. And Danielle, if you can open 4.7, yeah, thank you. Expanded on that and added some more detail of why this should be removed. So in response to the original triage from draft, there was a comment that it provides a implementation burden for a full summary to investigate the observations for a patient requiring a category and may miss items. I just want to note, or I want to bring up the fact that as part of AU Core, we are doing profiling on different observations, and the observation resource itself covers a very wide set of data, obviously anywhere from vital signs to lab results to things such as social determinants of health. So one massive search to return that is not going to do a good job covering all those different types. And part of what we're doing with AU Core is coming up with the minimum set of data we need for interoperability to say these are the types and profiles of those. So if you need vitals, you can use the category code of vitals to retrieve those vitals. If you need observations and results, there's associated category codes for those. And we should prevent just saying, give me every single possible observation, because those might not be well profiled or understood from the work we've done so far. There might be additional clinical concepts or things that as a group we haven't even covered with that. So call that out in the third paragraph. And then the other piece is this is something that doesn't align with a few other international IGs, such as US Core and IPS. Moving this down, either removing it or moving it down to May would align with those IGs. Finally, from a implementation perspective of implementing a FHIR server in a hospital EMR context, that generic observation search by only patient has potentially to return a very, very large volume of data especially when related to hospital inpatient stays, et cetera. And frankly, that breadth of data may not be useful to a lot of clients that are querying it. So for this specific one, it is this specific issue. It's looking to reopen it and revisit, removing that overall just patients only search from AU core observation. Are there any questions about that?
Federica.
Hi. So is the concern really on the load on the server?
It's a couple of different concerns. First, it's partly just the volume of data. Yes, that is a concern of returning all that data, but it's also the just general breadth of it and the fact that observation covers so much that there's a large kind of disjoint set of concepts to return under that umbrella that may or may not be well profiled already in AU core. So using what we're looking at in AU core, we are explicitly looking at vital profiles. We are explicitly looking at a base observation result profile, and we should make it so that you are explicitly saying, I need to retrieve this patient's vitals or this patient's
more direct
results. So
is there any other resource type for which we have removed patient-only search?
I don't know. I don't know if there are any other resource types that are as broad as this and cover as many different things as this.
I don't know. Let's go have a look. No, that doesn't count. No. Doesn't count. Medication request. No.
I mean, it makes sense. I understand the use case being more specific on the type of query that you provide, because you're probably interested only in lab tests, only on vitals, only on social determinants of health. But I do wonder if it's something that applies to other resources or how we.
I can confirm that at the moment, for the resources currently profiled in AU Core, all the clinical ones do have shell patient. So this would, at the moment, observation is the same as the others, which require a shell patient.
But I do think overall that all the other clinical resources are a lot more focused in the clinical content they are providing. David?
Yeah, I was just wondering, were you implying that someone's defining what is included in the vitals? Someone's already determined how many measurements are in that vitals group?
We have already gone through and created vital profiles for AU Core, but also if an implementer wants to include other vitals under that, they can. It just narrows the focus to say, when you query for an observation, you need to not only include the patient, but the category that you are querying for.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to work into the consistency pattern that you guys are setting up, so that if my consumers are going to say they want vitals, I can say, hey, look, here's a already packaged definition of what vitals includes. We can use this. I guess that's our opening.
I will respond to that. That's a very interesting point. So at the moment, just shell patient would give you vitals measures everything under the sun. The category field in observation, and that's the reason it's mandatory in the profiles, is how you say this kind of thing. So if you were looking for all vitals, you wouldn't be using patient, you'd be using at least patient plus category, which is mandatory. And that category would be the vitals category. And that would retrieve you every vitals observation that system knows.
Right. I guess so I'm trying to make sure that I'm clear about who's setting up the rules about what measurements are in what groups. And yeah.
So that is AU Core, yes, for the majority, for what's in scope of AU Core, yes. We'll add to that over time, likely.
Yeah, that makes, yeah.
I guess in terms of lots of the other resources come from an integration background, they all have a patient level search because they're already naturally categorized. Whereas the observations go across all of those different test types, radiology, cardiology, pathology, doctor notes, patient comments, they're not naturally categorized. And so it makes sense to add the category onto specifically the observations, because otherwise you're going to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of results and systems that we're forced to implement pagination, and it just brings in a whole bunch of complication that would have very few use cases.
Federico?
Are there observations that are not like standardly already profiled, or that we wouldn't catch if we wouldn't use category?
Absolutely. AU Core R1 only covers a certain scope, right? So to the extent that we have an agreed way, and we do, so this is no one's profiled everything under the sun yet. So there is always, and that was the argument of the last one. So I will say, I'm sharing here, but there's a tension between the two of saying, if we know how to find the things that we've agreed we care about, then that's patient plus category. If it's crucial that for all use cases you can do the catch-all, then you wouldn't be patient plus category, that'd just be patient. So at the moment, for everything that we profile, and that will be the case, we will always say, this is how you know what this is. We've got it for smoking status, we have it for pathology, which if I go there for category, we've got a fixed one so that you know, in fact, we've inherited it, which is why you couldn't see it on that view. Here, lab. So that will give you all pathology.
Yeah, as an implementer perspective, that doesn't preclude me from implementing other types of data. For example, if I have some additional social determinants of health or social history resources that I've also implemented, I can still surface those and return those, but I don't have an obligation to return everything under a generic patient search. This is what being proposed. Brett?
I was going to add to that in a similar way. Since category is mandatory for all. Well, I think what you've got to say is, if you want to find everything, you have to put all your observations into a category and know what all the categories are, right? So that way you could be able to search for anything in your system. So I think it is really, like Andrew's saying, it's because observations are used for so many different things. It really is not a particularly helpful search unless you're trying to extract all the data for a patient. To have that capability anyway. If you're trying to kind of produce a summary, that's easier.
Thanks, Brett. We're coming down to time.
Yep.
So in the interest of making a decision in this particular meeting, we might go final comment Landon, and then look to make a motion.
Just a super quick question. So within that category, you can specify multiple categories. That's correct, isn't it? Because it's a token. So you'd be able to manage your patient and then your full complete set.
Oh, you mean on the search parameter?
Yes.
Yes, depending on what you've implemented. Sorry, in terms of category, apologies if this is driving people mad as I scroll up and down. You would be, depends. You could do mandatory ORs. Yes, as in I'm looking for a patient with this or this or this or this or this or this or this. Yes, that's allowed. Yes.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Landon. So with that, I would like to.
So here's sorry.
With that, I'd like to motion to revisit this issue.
All right.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, so Andrew has motioned and Brett has seconded to revisit whether or not we support patient-only search for observations. I am going to launch the poll on that. So please vote. You're voting to revisit. So please vote affirmative if you think we should be re-looking at this from what's in AU Core. Okay, and again, if you don't have access to the content put in the chat or call out. All right, I'm going to close that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end that poll. Ooh, no, hang on, just a couple more people voting. All right, we're going to end that poll now. Okay, share results. For once, this is fabulous that it shows a percentage because we needed a 66% majority, and we have it, including with an affirmative in the chat. So with 19 voting affirmative, with 3 negative and 6 abstain, the motion is passed. We will revisit this decision. And in fact, I think given the discussion we have just had, would you like to make a motion, Andrew, on what you think the disposition of this should be?
Yes, I motion to remove the patient-only search from the AU Core observation profiles.
You don't want to do May, which was, sorry, your proposal is May?
I wrote it. I propose, I guess I motion to change the patient only search parameter on the AU Core observation profiles from shall to may.
Okay. Would anyone like to second that?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
I'm happy to second it. Oh, too slow.
Oh, too slow. Yep. So, okay, there's a motion on the table that instead of patient only being shall, that it moves to may, and for observation. And I'm just going to, are there any comments or questions while I find our electronic poll? I haven't heard anything, so I will relaunch the poll now. Okay, so the poll is there for the motion to change the shall for patient only to be may. All right, still got just a couple more people to do that or put into the chat. All right, I'm going to count that down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will end that poll and share results. There is a fairly overwhelming majority vote here. So 23 have voted affirmative, 0 negative, 3 abstain. That motion passes. We will be making that change in R1. And that is our last decision because we've gone over time. Apologies, everybody, for today's ballot reconciliation. But we've got through it. This was the agenda. So we're carrying stuff over. After this afternoon, there'll be some more block votes coming out. Crucial, this one. Have a look through it. It's very interesting. We've got search parameters in block vote 5. So we've put all those together. Please go through those. If you're confident on your decision vote, remembering that you can refer to telecom. If you think there's something in there that actually we need to talk about, then please refer to telecom. There are instructions on how. And then we've also got the vote on sex and gender concepts. What changes are coming through? These are editorial in nature into AU Core. And then we'll come back on the 31st of October and talk about what's been referred to telecom and the outcomes of the vote. And also we're going to talk through those ones that were postponed from this discussion into that next meeting. So thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate us getting through those decisions right at the end. Great work.
Great job. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
See you, everybody.